Thank you, everybody, for attending. You know, business education is a key area of support with the Steamboat Springs Chamber, and we're always excited to partner up with some of our great resources, education resources here in town. And obviously Randy and the Yampa Valley Entrepreneurship Center are just that. So, and to be able to do, you know, provide business education and do it for free really is a big deal. And it's exciting to me and Randy and everybody else for that matter. So thank you for attending today. And with that, I will turn it over to Randy.
All right, thank you. I know most of you pretty well. A couple of I don't, but I'll do a brief introduction. Randy Berdasius. I've been at CMC for 15 years, doing the Yampa Valley Entrepreneurship Center, which back in the day was the Bogue Enterprise Center. We offer some low-cost office space for small businesses and startups. We offer free business counseling and advising, of which I've worked with a couple people on this Zoom call. And we also do workshops and seminars in a variety of topics specific to small business or entrepreneurship. About a year ago, we started working with the Chamber as a way to get these webinars out to a broader audience. I look forward to the day we can do them back face-to-face again. This particular seminar today, Buying and Selling a Small Business, we do every 2 years. And so today's the day. You know, up and down Lincoln Avenue, there's a lot of small businesses. I think the overwhelming majority of businesses in this community are small businesses, which is great. It's what I love about Steamboat. What happens? A small business either starts, someone buys it, and then at some point it closes or sells. And usually sells, but not all sell. So we're going to cover half of that today, the buying and the selling part. And frankly, from my perspective, there's a lot of generational change going on too, as folks that have been around for a few decades are looking to move on, take on another chapter of life. And this is something that you really need to plan a year, 2 or 3 in advance to sell a business. It doesn't happen right away to get it done right. And I hope I can add some value, frankly, some financial value to your lives through the basic principles we discussed today. So I'm going to take over your eyes and take over the screen here and show you my PowerPoint, because it wouldn't be a webinar without a good PowerPoint, right? I'm disabled, Vic. Oops. Oh, I need a screen, Vic.
Yep, got you here. Should be able to now.
Okay.
See if that works.
Let's see, share. You got that, everybody?
Got it.
Right on. Well, there's my basic information. You probably have my email address. If not, please feel free to ask for it afterwards. I want to qualify this. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm just a guy with a lot of hot air that knows a few things about this and that. So you're going to need to seek qualified opinion on some of these things at some point in time. Just want to let you know that that's not my expertise. I'm also not a business broker. I can refer you to some, but that's not what I do. But I understand the principles here, and I hope to share those with you. And I'm not offering formal valuation help. It's not what I do for a living. I support a variety of entrepreneur stuff, but I don't do valuations. Finally, I will offer you a solid overview of this topic that'll give you a much higher IQ on the topics we're discussing today. Here's what we're going to cover today. Start out with valuation theory and something called seller's discretionary income, comps, or multiples of earnings will be a key concept we hit on with a number of slides. Listing a business, getting appraisals for that business, are they worth it? The sale and purchase process, steps that people go through to buy or sell a business. They don't apply to everybody, but I want to be comprehensive in the terms of traditional steps. Negotiation, the give and take that goes back and forth as part of this. Terms and language that are often used, and when to get professional help. I will note that in 2005, we sold our employment and staffing agency in South Bend, Indiana. That frankly gave me enough money to move out here. And otherwise, I'd probably still be back in Indiana looking at clouds all the time. And that I have some experience with this. I've also helped many people in this community go through this process, understand the steps they need to, refer them to professionals when they needed help professionally as well. So some basic strategies for establishing value. For the most part, when you buy a business or sell a business, you're buying a stream of income. You're buying yourself a wage, essentially. That is something that you capitalize. You basically determine the value of that stream of income for 5 or 7 years, and you pay the owner for that stream of income, okay? That is the primary purpose of valuation, is to establish that value for that income potential for the business. The income may change. You may do better or worse than the previous owner. There may be economic factors that come in, so there is risk involved in this, but the primary goal is to kind of capitalize that. The basic concept behind that is seller's discretionary income, and I have several slides on that coming up. And that number, that seller's discretionary income, is often multiplied by some comp that's relevant to a particular industry, and that establishes a range of value that this business will fit within. And then that range is negotiated. There can be a lot of factors affecting the range, and we will touch on the various factors that affect value so that it isn't exactly at the median, essentially, of these various comps. Most of us have sold homes. We know comps are a key part of the valuation of real estate. It's the same in small business here. You're buying a multiple of earnings, adjusted earnings, and those result in value. Income approach is the most commonly used. That's defining the future economic benefits and establishing a value on those benefits. Asset approach is also used. Commonly with the asset approach, the main reason you don't use the income approach is because there's a lot of real estate involved, and the real estate, particularly in a mountain town like ours, where it's so expensive, is the major thing the individual is buying. So if you're buying a property, the hotel on Lincoln Avenue that's been for sale for years, you may not really care that much about the valuation of that hotel in terms of income stream, but you are going to redevelop the property. And so you will look at a real estate-based asset approach to valuation. And other times, there could be other factors here that affect that as well, including, I guess, intangible assets, some kind of technology someone has that really has a lot of upside and growth potential that really hasn't been defined as income yet. A lot of new tech businesses, for example, are really priced exceptionally high because of the potential, the market value of that business. So they don't really fit into the income approach that as well either. So they'll look at intangibles and intellectual property, things like that, to establish value. Let's see, what else have I got here? If the owner is retiring, so if you're, let's say 65, 68, and you are fed up and you don't want to do it anymore, a little tired, want to travel, whatever your reason is, you may not have much else to sell except your tools, truck, maybe a customer list that may be worth something, maybe not. So again, sometimes the assets in those situations are more important because really you're just buying this person's tools and hoping you can run the business forward based on that. But that person had a skill set they built a career on, and now you're just taking over the tools and trying to follow in their footsteps. That's more asset-based too. Market-based, what are the comparables for similar businesses in the state of Colorado or in mountain towns? Is it a high growth potential business that really needs to be valued a different way? And then finally, fair market value. What are the willing seller and willing buyer going to pay for it? Because you can do all this song and dance around these theories, but if Julie is going to sell for X and Bob is only going to pay Y, and they can't solve the difference, it doesn't matter, all this theory. It's really what somebody's willing to sell it for and another person's willing to buy it for. So it does come down to fair market value at the end, but you'll have a better argument to get your value, whether as a buyer or seller, if you have good documentation and good theory behind your lesson here, your experience. So this is a little old. It really ends near the end of 2017, before the pandemic. But I wanted to show you this website, Biz Buy Sell, BIZBUY Sell. It is a large website for business transactions. So you can go in here and kind of put in some key variables from your company, and it will give you a rough valuation. Okay, and I don't know the cost, $50. It's not like you're hiring an expert market valuation person, an appraiser essentially. This is not as good, but it is a good starting point. It also has a lot of lessons on how to do this stuff, probably more than I can cover in this amount of time. It's a good website to go to, but if you can see this graph here, average sales price as a multiplier of cash flow of 2.2 to 2.4, kind of give and take a little bit. And then the one below is average sales price as a multiple of revenue or sales. And that's 0.6, 0.7 maybe. This is nationwide across many, many industries. So it's probably not relevant to your situation, but they have some of this stuff for different kinds of industries too. Not every industry is here, but I really wanted you to see this website and show that there's also been a lot of stability on business sales prices. The pandemic has most likely affected that. Some people may want to get out and be on fire and be willing to sell. Other people want to liquidate assets, bankruptcies. There's certainly a different vibe out there right now. So what is the seller's discretionary income? Every owner makes choices about their business. And what we do here is try to wash out the choices the owners make and just look at the core business itself. So a good example of that might be you have put your whole family on your cell plan, okay? Or you've paid yourself some earnings that are inconsistent with the job. You're getting paid well. Perhaps a fancy truck that's well beyond the needs of the business, okay? But it's being leased and the business is paying for it. There's a lot of things individual small business owners do to reward themselves for their time and effort and money. And this process of seller's discretionary earnings back those things out. So really what you're evaluating is essentially the meat and potatoes of the business, okay? The example here is reported profit for an S corporation return. Sometimes we look at the W-2 earnings of the individual owner. We'll back out things like insurance, life insurance, car insurance, cell phone plan, maybe other discretionary travel, and interest, depreciation, and amortization, because those three things the new business owner may not have. Okay, so they're relevant to the prior owner. They may not be relevant to the new owner. They'll put their own numbers in there to see whether this is going to work for them. So let me move on here. So this is a liquor store S corporation. See the sales here were 1.4 million, and all of these are adjustments against the business income to find this term called seller's discretionary earnings. You'll see compensation is added back in, interest on business loans is added back in, appreciation of assets is added back in, health insurance on the owner's family is added back in, and here they have a couple of other categories, cell, travel, and life insurance. So the number that we'll be evaluating against other companies is $180,000 in earnings. When we sold our family business at Star, the owners, the people that bought the business, which was a bigger staffing service than us, they were eight times our size, so they absorbed us. They backed out a lot of our expenses in order to come up with what they thought they could make on our company moving forward. And that frankly added value to us because, we had our expenses built in there and they backed those out. They also didn't need to run our payroll department. Those people were going to get let go because they could incorporate the payroll into their own administrative processes. So there was adjustments there so they could look at this apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Anybody have any questions on this so far? Okay. All right. Key concept here is, how do you figure out a price that will attract a buyer? Many people try to look at the market. Okay, the best way to start this is the market. What are other businesses in this industry pricing for around the country? An appraisal is a place to start that. Appraisals are not cheap. They can be over $1,000 for a decent sized business because somebody's going to spend 20 hours or more digging through your numbers, trying to figure out what makes sense. But if you have a good number that's documented by earnings that are behind it and by a third party certified to do appraisals, don't you have a better tool to start advertising your business with and to negotiate with other people? Okay, so there is value to appraisals. They generally give you some proof that maybe this is worth that to an outsider who doesn't have any more experience than you do as a seller. This is going to be based on completed transactions of similar businesses. All comps are like that, and there is a national database of all these things. A valuation company, a business broker, some CPA firms have paid for access to this list. It is not cheap. That is part of the reason appraisals cost money, is because they're subscribing to these national databases of, for example, liquor store valuations. Okay. As you can see the example, I want to sell a liquor store that does 1.4 million in sales and produces 180,000 discretionary earnings for the owner. That's something that you can look at the market and say, well, that's going to be worth X, or X plus or minus some adjustments based on a variety of factors I'll talk about in the next few slides. So this is what it looks like. Is a comparable set of data for liquor stores. You can see the revenue here, the seller's discretionary earnings, inventory numbers here, fixed expenses are here, rent as a percentage, asking price, actual price, price versus revenue, and then price as a multiple of the seller's discretionary income. Note the 2.7 here, that is the average, okay? So, and how many transactions are we looking at here? I guess this summary doesn't say it, but there looks like there's 12 or 14 here, and there may be more. This may be just one page, okay? And you can see the range, as the lowest number I see here is 1.9, the highest is, I think, 4.2. Again, there's multiple variables that affect that, and this is a range, but this would be a good place to start with. So you look at the businesses, seller's discretionary earnings, and you multiply it by 2.7, and you have some starting point for valuing a business. Do these comps work? How many comparisons are there? Is it a new industry? Is there a history across the country or in Colorado of these? Does the database include this particular industry? I'm like, for example, if you have a boutique business, it's unusual and different, and I know at least one person on this call has that. Is there going to be something similar? Sometimes you have to look to related industries and not the same industry. If you're doing clothing, for example, you might look at other types of clothing companies versus trying to find exactly your type of clothing business, okay? Is the data recent? I'm guessing everything I say today has been affected by the pandemic, including business valuations, okay? So there's going to be some blips in this, and it would be important, particularly if you're looking at doing something next year, the year after, that you look at this year as a bit of an anomaly. I hope it's only 1 year, by the way. That we, values might have gone down a little bit, but I don't know the answer to that at all. So keep an eye on these things. Come back and see me, talk to your CPA, get a formal valuation, where they can have the actual history of transactions to look at to see how the pandemic has affected all this stuff. Are the deals similar in nature? Not every liquor store is the same. Not every business you're doing is the same. There are so many variables, and I have a few slides on some of those variables coming up. Does it apply to Steamboat? Things in Steamboat tend to be more expensive. Does that carry over to the small business market or small businesses? I think it does. I think national numbers carry over to Steamboat. The exception is when real estate's involved. Okay, if you're acquiring a building, a condo building, something like that, our real estate on average is going to be more expensive, and that will need to be figured into the numbers. Occasionally, I've heard rumor that there are people from moving here from other parts of the country that have big wallets and want to buy themselves a job. If you can bump into one of those, God bless you. Otherwise, you try to sell your business for a fair price and get the best out of it you can and help the person start that business and run it effectively, and then hand it off and walk away clean and move on to the next pace of your life. Yes, Catherine.
Hey, Randy, does having a long-term lease associated in a prime location, does that help
Yes.
and factor into the scenario?
In most cases, as long as it's not too expensive, it helps a lot.
Okay.
Stability is, when you're buying a business, you want stability. You want your customers to know where you're at. And if there's a new face in the front door, it makes them feel a little more comfortable that at least the surroundings look the same.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the service industry like you're doing is quite the same as it would be for a retail or a food service, but it still matters. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
All right, next slide. All right. This is really important concept here. Comps may be used to help confirm the results, but not necessarily to create it. Okay, so you might find that range. I think I'm looking at a $300,000 sales price here, but they don't necessarily determine the final price of the transaction at all. Quality of the assets. Are they beat up and used? Are they worn out? Nature of the clients. If you serve 3 clients, you're a much riskier business than somebody that serves 40 clients because you're very concentrated in 1 or 2 industries. Trends in the industry. Is this industry moving forward or moving backwards? Is technology taking it over and you're not there in that technology thing so much? Maybe that is an opportunity for the new owner to actually evolve the business to a new set of customers. Community presence. Is your brand something within the community that people are aware of? Or is it kind of a quiet brand that sits in the background? Okay. All of you, most of you here have some brand awareness in our community. That can be a contributor to value for what you're trying to do. Your skill set versus the previous owner's skill set. Okay. For example, a restaurant chef that wants to buy a new restaurant. That person, frankly, better have a good menu. It's good to transition a menu over a period of time, 6 months or a year versus all of a sudden. People will be anxious about a change in a menu. But is the chef as good as the previous chef? Can they put food on the table that people want to eat? Okay. If you have a technical set of skills, does the new person that is acquiring the business have the same set of technical skills? Or do they need to get better and practice for a few years? And, all these things contribute to the value. Finally, what is the urgency to sell? Some people on this call are thinking about selling in the future, maybe next year, maybe 3 years from now. They're just here to learn. But if you hit a point in life where you need to sell, then you have a sense of urgency and your considerations for value will increase. What might be those considerations to sell in a hurry? Anybody want to conjecture? A common one is divorce and the need to split up assets for a partnership that was based in marriage. Age, health concerns are common too. A back problem, for example. You had a plumbing business for years and all of a sudden it's much harder to work and do what you need to do. That can force somebody to want to sell. I had a close cousin who did tile, was very successful at it, was making six figures, but his body gave out in his early 50s and he couldn't do it anymore. So, he sold his tile business. Again, what are you selling? If you're the skill behind the business, you're selling basically your tools and a customer list, which isn't worth a ton to some people. Okay. Next slide. Revenue trend. Is the business going up in revenue or down? Again, COVID will affect that, but it's still a factor in valuations. Is the seller's discretionary earnings going up or down? Is this business improving, growing? Is the owner taking full advantage of the marketplace? The age and condition of facilities and equipment. Is your space in good shape? Is your trucks and vehicles good shape? If you're running a restaurant, is the freezer fairly new? Is the ranges equipment fairly new? Will they need thousands of dollars in investments to keep them running because of their age and condition? These are considerations in value that might affect the value up or down from what the comps say the business should be worth. Desirability of location. In Steamboat, downtown between 13th and 3rd is a pretty good location. But if you come out to the west side towards where I work and you're trying to do retail, it's a little tougher. I think that's slowly changing, but it's probably a ways away to be similar to downtown. So some businesses have, just by the nature of their storefront, have great desirability. People can see them. That's part of their advertising because they're on a really highly traveled road or sidewalk. The lease risk. Kate mentioned that. Is the lease got 8 months on it? And that location is a big part of the attraction. It's good to secure your lease for a period of time if you plan to sell a retail or restaurant-based business, and location is a key factor in that business. Okay. You're just taking a chunk of risk out of it by having the lease not be a worry for the person taking over the business. Okay. Key employee risk. Very few of us work in a vacuum. We're surrounded by some employees that do major work to make this business successful. Is that those key people going to leave? Can you retain them? Are you a good manager or leader? Is that person also kind of aligned with the previous owner and will leave when they leave because, they've been loyal to that person, not necessarily to that business. So being able to evaluate the key people that are part of the business and determine whether we can keep them as part of the valuation equation for a new business buyer. But bottom line, I've said this again, I think I may even have this one more slide later on. The price is cash or cash equivalents at which a property would change hands between a hypothetical willing and able seller and a hypothetical willing and able buyer. It assumes both parties are knowledgeable about the property and the market for such properties and that neither is acting under duress or compulsion to buy or sell. Okay, that is the basis for fair market value in a lot of transactions, not just small business. The reason we go through this process of valuation is to get a logical basis to develop value. It helps you as a seller or buyer build confidence. It helps really with a lender. If you need to buy if you're going to buy a business and you need a lender, they're going to want to see this kind of thing. Make sure they're not helping finance some too much blue sky. It assumes both parties are equally motivated, and the party with the most logical basis usually wins the negotiation. Okay. If I told you I wanted to sell you my business for $250,000 because I've worked at it for 30 years, by God, and because I've made a good living and raised my family on this. But you look at the comparables and the asset quality, and you say it's worth $150,000, and you can really document that through third-party valuation. You know, I can either choose not to sell, or I can recognize that you're right. And if I really want to sell this and get out of this thing, I've got to be closer to your value than my value. Make sense? Okay. Many people, because we're such a small business community, do it themselves. And I mentioned that website, Biz Buy Sell, as a place to get a little bit of help establishing these things. But it's like most do-it-yourself projects: collect information, figure it out, organize it, calculate the results, and put the results to work in terms of listing or buying a business. Okay, simple kind of theory stuff right here. What are the steps to a business transaction? This is really important. So look at these things carefully. I'm going to kind of hit on these a bit as well. Where do you find a non-disclosure agreement? If you're a seller, you need one of these because you don't want to give anybody information other than maybe a really brief 1 or 2 page summary until they've signed a non-disclosure agreement. And this non-disclosure agreement has to have some teeth in it. So there's some financial penalties for releasing any of this data. If I was selling a business, I'd do a 2-page flyer to hand out to looky-loos and maybes, or just people that are checking it out. That is essentially a promotional piece for the business, for its value to the community. It wouldn't share many secrets. I might talk about general numbers like my sales, the years I've been in business, the types of customers we service, the nature of my assets, that they're fairly new, for example. It'd be all sales. I wouldn't go into any details on this informational flyer that I would give out to looky-loos that are knocking on my door saying, well, I heard you're for sale. What about, tell me something about it. Before I give them any more detailed information, I would have them sign a non-disclosure agreement. You can get those on LegalZoom or other websites. You can have any of our small business attorneys can give you one in town here as well. They probably would not be too expensive. They just need to be customized with your information. The key here is having some teeth in it. So there's some financial penalties to disclosure. Okay. Next up is an information review. You give a flyer, you talk, you have a meeting. They ask for some additional sales and profitability information. You exchange information. They determine that they may like what they have, and we start talking about price range for this. Maybe they give you a letter of intent or a letter of interest on buying the business. That's no firm commitment. It just means I'm interested. And these are steps I went through as we sold our business for sure. Then there's due diligence, and I've got a separate slide on that coming up. In fact, the next slide. So I'm going to sit on that, but that's basically a detailed review of the company's financial documents to prove that things are as they are presented. Okay, and it usually occurs with accounting professionals. Valuation variables are compared. You might use a broker for this. You might try to get your CPA to do it for you, but you try to document the income stream and establish a firm value for this and make an offer. Okay. This is kind of where the rubber hits the road. You've determined that this is what the business is making. I make my adjustments to it. Then I think about what I can do with the business the next 5 years with the improvements I feel need to be made. Is this something I want to do? Is it my next step in life? Okay. Then you talk to your banker or lender and you say, would you consider financing this? Is there enough collateral in the transaction for you to finance it? Really, you want to keep your lending officer with you the whole process along the way. Then you extend an offer. And then we play back and forth to get a little closer to reality. And this can be, honestly, it took us probably 8 to 10 months to get this negotiations done when we sold our company. It was little things basically, but essentially, eventually we got it done. And sometimes it means just somebody has to think about it some. And that might have been my brothers and sisters who were co-owners with me. And it might have been some of the buyer, the company that was competing with, trying to see how anxious we were to sell. And we were anxious, but we were not anxious enough to give good value away in the transaction. So by being patient, they raised their offer a little bit, okay? And eventually it hit a point where we said, yes, we'll take that deal. We did a letter of intent, we set a closing date, we did the due diligence, and we moved forward to the transaction. Many transactions in Steamboat are very small, so some of these steps might not occur. Okay, but this is a standard for any decent medium-sized business, and many of you have that, in my opinion, to go through. So what is this due diligence thing? The term is used in a lot of things in life. It means you studied something, you thought through it, you read the materials, you researched, you did your background checks. In small business transactions, it means you dig through the financial records to find the things that contribute to value. You do discovery and then you interpret that information. This is probably going to be required, not usually, if you're borrowing money against it, because the bank wants documentation that what they're lending against is real, okay? When we did our business, my experiences was about 7 or 8 days in a rented hotel room, 10 miles from the office, where on the weekend, I brought in boxes of financial records along with a company controller. And at the time, she was the only person that knew we were looking at selling. I had to have her trust. And I paid for that trust with an exit package, by the way, for her. But that company that was buying us brought in their own CPA and one of their senior managers to go through our records for eight or 9 days. Okay, they dug through everything. Their goal was to prove to themselves that we were legit, that there was no funny money in our records, and that they were able to prove that. I'll also say that every second or third year, we had a CPA audit of our book company, and that also helps document that your numbers are real. If a CPA audits your books, then anybody buying that company is going to trust those books to a much higher degree, all right? So leaves no stone unturned. Don't take for granted what somebody's small business records show, because I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, some of them are full of BS, okay? Many people that have a trade skill, that have run a business for years and made a really good living, kept very poor records. And the only way to prove to yourself that buying this business is good is to look at the records. And if they're bad, it's worth less money, frankly, because you're buying more of a wing and a prayer. Yeah. This is typical data collected. Also, I want you to know that I have a very extensive checklist for due diligence, probably 7 or 8 pages. So if you're looking to buy a business or you're looking to get ready to sell and you want to copy that, I can either scan it or I probably have it on my file. I could just email it to you. So consider that if you get to that point in time. I'm happy to include that in email. But company identity, who you think you say you are, ownership, location and contact information, description of business, trailing revenues, expenses, and earnings. All the financial statements need to be very carefully reviewed. Balance sheet, something else that's not listed here is accounts receivables. When we sold our business, we actually kept the accounts receivables, and they were part of the sales price that we collected them, and a big chunk of the money is cashing out our receivables. Multi-year financial forecast. What's your market position? Are you a small player in the community or a big player? You have a dominant brand name and awareness. What's your product or service in detail? Tell me about your workforce, how long they've been there, what their background is, skill levels. Pending opportunities, is there anything at closing soon? New customers, new opportunities. John mentioned a new customer that he's looking at that would be meaningful to his business. Those can add value and add interest in closing a business. Photos, maps, description of any physical assets. If you have vehicle fleet, a fleet, you might want the condition, date, mileage on your fleet. Location, traffic patterns are available from CDOT for most spaces. Exposure to large accounts. Again, if you have one account that you're doing 40% with, it can be risky for a buying customer because they may not be able to keep that account. Okay, so these are examples of the kind of details that due diligence includes. And also within particular types of industries, there may be other specific data that's relevant to that industry. I've learned in food service here, traffic count, how many people come to the door, table turns per night, how many people sit at that table, how many times is exchange a night, 2.5 is typical for a good business. It's not been occurring lately. The menu, is it relevant? Is it contemporary? Are you including things that a younger generation might want? For example, vegetarian options, things like that. The age of your kitchen, which is a big deal because that stuff's expensive. Seating capacity, for example, how much bar traffic you do as well, because liquor has better margins than food. Couple other things to consider here. Who are you buying? Who are you selling to? Or, is this person legit? There's a lot of scammers out there, and they're very creative. And I recently had someone file unemployment on me, so I'm a little bit more sensitive about that right now. Fortunately, CMC caught it right away, so I don't think it went through. But if I'm sure you're like me, I'm getting hit on for some kind of deal on the internet all the time that's all bogus. This happens with buying and selling businesses too. Okay, so they will use your excitement about selling your business to get information from you, which is meant to attack your assets in other places. You can get a credit investigation on these folks. Your bank would help you with this probably. If not, we have a detective in town named Dave Kleber, who does that sort of thing too, for a fee. And frankly, I think there's some online services that do this too. Not all the information out there is complete, but it is accessible to get background information of people, particularly if they're like coming from St. Louis and they want to buy a business in Steamboat. I'd want to know something about them. Is this legit? Can they even, why are we even wasting time if they have no money or no credit to buy this business? They're just dreamers. Okay. Uniform Commercial Code filings. Are there liens on the assets? This is a big deal. If there's liens on their assets, they can't sell them to you. Okay. If they can't sell them to you, then they can't sell their business. The liens have to be paid off. When we sold our company, all of our office equipment had liens on it as part of our general line of credit with the bank. So the bank loan had to be paid off with the first check written by the company that bought us. Okay. And that was part of closing, just like the second mortgage on your house has to be paid off, and the first. When you close on your home, the liens have to be paid off first. Are there bankruptcy filings, criminal filings against this person that you're considering partnering with and giving up your business and your identity to, not identity, your soul, your business soul here. Better Business reports. If you're going to buy a business, you want to know how it's perceived. Check the Better Business files. I will say this, not that many businesses in Steamboat have a BBB file, but almost all of them have Yelp or TripAdvisor files. So you look where you can to find information. If you're going to the Front Range, most businesses have BBB files. It's a little more extensive, a little more professional than Yelp. Yelp can be yellers, but it's BBB is a little more thorough. It also gives the business a chance to reply and fix the problem and report that repair. Online blogs, community feedback, anything you can find. Ask some community leaders if there's any background in this business that might affect your interest as well. Non-disclosure agreements are written promises not to disclose information about a business. Pretty important stuff. They're inexpensive online. You want to make sure it's customized and you want to make sure it's got some teeth. They are normal and appropriate for an in-depth review of company information. If you're going to buy a business, You should be willing to sell one of these before you get much detail. If you're going to sell a business, you should be willing to give a potential buyer one of these to complete. And I think it's important for me to note that tax returns are a big part of the information you're going to study. You want to document the earnings that are on the financial statements by the tax returns, okay? People are much less likely to lie on their tax return because there's consequences are much bigger. Frankly, you can make an income statement or a balance sheet any way you want for a third party, but if you do that, start tricking with the IRS, the consequences are much higher. So I'd want to validate the income the seller says is there with their tax return. And I'm certainly willing to blank out the Social Security number on there to let that go through, but I need to see that to make sure that what you put on your financial statements is close to reality. There's no guarantee of secrecy. Again, consider remedies. Also, you as the owner need to shut up and let this process play out without telling your 10 friends, hey, Joe is thinking about buying this. We're on second base on this thing, and geez, I'm looking at buying an RV and traveling the West, okay? You got to be quiet and let this thing play out because it may fall apart. In fact, they often do. Contract continue to disclose more information after acceptance of an offer is normal. Please don't give any customer files or records until closing. That's what the check is for that you get and put in your back pocket or in your bank, is for your client list, okay? Those things don't go until that check is in your pocket. Then you give them all that client stuff. It's theirs. They bought it, okay? Failure to disclose information. If somebody's not going to share you good data on their business, it's a red flag. Something's going on there. It's either bogus, you have terrible records, the business is failing, something is amiss, and you don't want to swim in that pool, okay? If you can't get good data. Okay, next up. The primary asset we tend to buy with a business is the stream of income the business is going to produce. If you can't document that stream of income, you're not buying anything except a wish or a dream. Typical financial data that people are going to look for. The assets, what is their book value? What is their fair market value? Have these things been checked out? Are they too old? Are they meaningful? Do they have good legs on them still that'll last a while? An intangible asset might be some intellectual property or some brand awareness in your community that you really can't put a number on. Sometimes patents, trademarks are also part of this too. Tangible property is real estate, buildings, tools, things like that. Goodwill. Goodwill is a key concept in this. Let's say again an example. We did evaluation. We've settled on a business value of $250,000, but the buyer is willing to pay $300,000 for the business. That extra $50,000 is goodwill. It's above and beyond the market value because they see in your brand, in the future, in the potential of this business, into the really good customer base you have, there is something above and beyond the documented value. That is called goodwill, okay? Obsolescence, shucks, every time you look around, the marketplace is being reinvented by new software application tools, by a new generation of young people that are doing business differently than my generation did. Is your business still is relevant now and going to be relevant in 5 or 10 years? Will it be obsolete or much diminished in terms of what it's going to do? And I think it's important to consider this, to look into the future with a crystal ball and say, am I buying a business that has viability for years to come? And can I document that viability for potential buyer? Okay. Liabilities. Again, this is a key concept in this presentation today. Most business sales are for the assets and customer lists. You don't buy the LLC. You don't buy the S corporation. You buy the stuff they own. I don't want the LLC because there may be court judgments against it. The owner may have all kinds of baggage in their old company. I just want the business assets and the customer list. Okay, so very few small businesses include buying the LLC. You buy the stuff, not the company behind it. A key important item. Now, if you're a Fortune 1000 company and you're buying a $1 billion company, you have the legal and professional team to do that, to buy the company. As small businesses, we can't really know what's behind that LLC, so we just buy the stuff. It's part of it. Finally, equity. You're going to have to put something down on this. It's unusual to be able to finance all of this through a bank. So some individual contribution to the equity, and it kind of depends on the business. Service business would tend to be more kind of a manufacturing or physical-based business that has some real assets. Probably would be a little less because they'll lend you more with better collateral. And then get some professional help from a CPA and the tax benefits and all this stuff. It's a big deal. And you could lose thousands of dollars if you don't amortize the equipment you have that you're buying from the seller the right way. When you buy, let's say, $80,000 worth of assets, and you're going to re-amortize those on your own schedule for a number of years based on the IRS schedules, get it right, because it's a big deal. A few basic concepts to boost your value. If you're looking to sell, secure your business location, your lease, basically have a great internet presence. Not a good one, a great one. Clean up your business, make it look good. When people look at it, they want to have a room full of boxes and junk. If you need your signage needs to be freshened up, then freshen it up. Same with buying a car. Would you try to sell your car without washing it, detailing it? No. You sell your house without getting, a fresh coat of paint put on the walls? Probably not. Keep your financials and contracts up to date. Have contracts. Contracts are important with key customers. If you are selling to the same party over and over again, and that party is part of the transaction, you make sure you have a contract to sell to them for the next year or whatever. Help the new owner by creating a succession plan. 2 pages of details, an outline of what they need to do to take over this business and get it going right away. Help the new owner by agreeing to be there for them, perhaps full-time for a month, part-time for 3 months, part-time for 6 months, whatever will give them the confidence that they can take over a complicated new business without too many hiccups or stubbed toes, okay? Be part of the solution for them to be successful in the business. That's gonna raise your value quite a bit because we all need to minimize our risk and worry. Become more visible, improve your public relations and your brand in the community if you can, and create a meaningful online. I've said that before, but it's again, doubly important. If you are a retail store or a restaurant again, have you added the capacity to take orders online and do pickup, that sort of thing? Most of our small restaurants have, and I think some of them did a phenomenal job of doing it quickly. But that's something to consider too. Eliminate your weaknesses. Everybody's got weaknesses, try to minimize them. Identify opportunities for the new buyer. If I was going to stay in this business 5 years, this is what I do. Okay, here's some suggestions to improve this business that would take money or time that I don't want to spend anymore. But if they're a competitor, there may be some economies of scale. As I said, when we sold our business, they merged the payroll function, and that was a big part of our business into one. So it helped them. Structure more than one transaction option for this buyer. Another key concept here is, are you willing to finance the buyer of the business at all? Okay, it's not uncommon for some sellers to be part of the financial solution for the buyer. That's okay, as long as the contracts are extremely tight and you are prepared to take the business back if the seller doesn't follow through on payment, okay? Because that's going to be your lien, is you get the business back. But if you think the person's qualified, particularly if it's an employee, it may be something you're willing to do, okay? Because you know they can run the business well. But some internal financing outside of the banking community happens quite a bit, honestly. In fact, when we sold our business, we got a check equivalent to 20% of the gross margin of the monthly sales for 18 months. That was part of our price too. So we were participating. Yes. Go ahead.
Those transactions is one way to do it to look at lease real estate. So if the business includes real estate, that could be an option, or you could also sell the business without the real estate, stuff like that.
Yes, you can do that. You know, real estate really, and Steamboat is a big, you're an architect, you know how valuable it is. So that's going to change the valuation parameters of your business.
Sure.
But it also is going to make it much more tougher for a young person to come along and buy it because of that big expense obligation out there.
Right.
So I would consider doing it both ways, but you also need to have a backup plan for the real estate too. Can you rent it to somebody else? Can you sell it independently on the open market? So I'd have a structure, multiple transactions in your mind. But yes, a young startup architect's probably going to have a tough time acquiring that space unless they've been in the business for 5 or 10 years and have a pretty good track record.
Right. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Structure, let's see, clear title, make sure the real estate's title free. Title company can help you with that. The bank probably can too. You own your software. Many of you have customized software. You don't want to be using forged copies of software. And also, you know, selling a business takes time, sometimes years. I hate to say it. And don't burn out. Have a vision for this life that you want to live next, but work hard and be successful until you're there. Why waste a year and a half or 2 years of your life suffering through the end when you might as well write it out, maybe make a little extra money, prepare yourself for that RV trip, whatever. Try not to burn out. Because if you do it, your business will suffer too. And your employees will see that you're burning out, and they'll get a little sketchier about their interest in continuing to work with you. Really important stuff to remember. The purchase and sale of a new business requires an attorney. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay, even a small business, the final documents need to be reviewed and in most cases prepared by an attorney. Okay. And this is going to cost several $1,000s. Okay. So it needs to be bundled into your pricing concepts, and also it's like a commission. You need to pay a real estate agent to sell something. In this case, for business, it's going to be attorney help. We have a bunch of really good small business attorneys in town that can handle almost all sales of these types of small businesses. You're also probably going to need a CPA. Your financials need to be crisp and up to date and accurate. And also they might want to help you, if you're a buyer, go through the company you're buying's records and make sure they don't find any anomalies or weirdness, okay? So using professionals throughout this process can save you a lot of money and heartburn. And I don't see how you can close a small business without an attorney doing the documents for you. Expect last minute changes. Negotiations can be brutal at times. Some of these people aren't your friends. 2 weeks before we were to close on our business, we lost a client in LaPorte, Indiana. And all of a sudden that deal was going to blow up. And I was just terrified. I think I literally shook when the phone call came, says, you know, this is not the same business we were looking to buy. Well, we did some dancing and we had to change our numbers a little bit to accommodate that, but they were really just trying to play with us. And we had to declare this meaningful change. Our letter of agreement on the sale included we had to declare this loss of client. We did, and that cost us a little bit of money. Customer lists and competitive secrets are not exchanged until closing. Don't give away your kitchen sink until you get the check in your hand. If you're a buyer, be ready to operate on day one. You're 60 days up to the closing, you're putting your pieces together to run the business. It's a very critical time frame. You've got to be really relaunch this thing, get out, meet everybody, be successful right away, and keep your lender in the loop all along. Okay, they are your ally in this case. They want to see you successful. Other transition factors: if you are buying a business and the day you take over, you need to have your own credit card processing system set up. You can't use the other one. That went with that company. Need to have a decent billing and collection system set up. Sometimes credit card processing is all you need, but other businesses will do billings and have to collect on them. You need to have public relations and a customer retention plan. Think through all the people you need to visit your first month or two. Okay, get out, shake hands, and kiss babies. Be a politician, be successful, rebuild relationships, and show that you're as good as Julie was in terms of serving customers. And if you have vendor relationships, construction companies, for example, contractors, you want to make sure that as the new owner, you have as good or better relationships with those people as the previous owner did. Know your competition. The marketplace you're going into in the Valley here probably has several key competitors. I know where I'm from, and we were a little more shark-oriented back in Indiana than we are at Steamboat. But my customers would throw me off the bridge in 2 seconds for 1% of my revenue. Okay, and so I don't think it's nearly as bad here, but they see a weakness and a change in ownership, they're going to go after my customers like that. So be prepared, and don't think that everything's all groovy in a small town. You want to make sure your customers are retained to the best of your ability. Also, you want to make sure your staff's retained, or not in some cases. If the previous owner said, I've been holding on to Joe here for 2 years because he's old and he's retiring soon, and I'm not sure how much he's contributing. You have to make the decision whether you want to keep Joe or not. Those that are valuable and adding value to the company, one-on-one meetings, incentives to stick around for 90 days to try it out, make sure it's good. Whatever you can do to make sure they feel welcome, thanked, and rewarded for their contribution and the risk they're taking to move in with new owners like you. And then you have a little extra working capital in place. Okay, taking over business means maybe needing some cash to keep things working well and smooth and all that sort of stuff. So is there something in the bank to run the business with for a little bit of time? Also, in many cases, your billings will take 30 to 45 days to pay out, and you need to make some payments before that. So I think I only have one more slide. Help. Business brokers. We have several that are operating in our community. If you feel like a broker is somebody you need, drop me a note. I'll send you a couple of leads for business brokers. Several real estate agents in our community also list businesses. It's kind of a side project. And I would think one in particular, Jim Cook, makes a living off of it. But there's other people that are also listing businesses. I think most of the major brokerages have someone that's focused on businesses. And I mentioned the website, Biz Buy Sell. That's an online business brokerage, and there's several others too, where you can list your business nationally for people fishing around. Finally, you can put it in the newspaper. Or you can build a website. There's a lot of homegrown ways to create awareness. Those homegrown self-sell type of businesses require more legal help because in general, a business broker knows a lot of the steps and can access some of the documentation that you would have to go to an attorney for if you're working on your own. Again, I think CPA is a big part of the pocketbook, and frankly, I can help you a little bit too here. So don't be shy about maybe reaching out for a little help. Again, I'm more about process than I am value or legal details. So that's my program. Any questions anybody has or wants to bring up, I'm happy to do my best to answer today. I should say the slides I have are public. So if you want a copy of these slides, I gave Vic a copy, but I'm also willing to send you one. All you got to do is either drop me a voicemail or a call, pardon me, a voicemail or an email, and I'll send you the slides.
Thanks,
If you,
Randy.
if you have a one-on-one conversations you want to continue with, call me next week or the week after, and we can talk about specifics of your situation, and maybe we can tighten up the discussion a bit to a more specific situation. Okay, Vic.
Excellent. Hey, thank you, Randy. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Have a good day. Take care, buddy.
You too. Bye-bye.